من إحسانه ونير برهانه ونوامر فضل امتنانه حمدا يكون لحقه قضاء ولشكره أداء وإلى صوابه موجبا ولحسن مزيده مقربا الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين راحة للعاشقين والمراد المشتاقين شمس العارفين والسراج الصادقين نبيه مصباح والعلم صاحب جود والكرم والله حافظه وجبرائيل خادمه والبراق مرقمه سدرة المنتهى مقامه كعب قوسين محبوب رب المشرقين والمغربين جد الحسن والحسين مولانا ومولاي الثقلين أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
ثم الصلاة والسلام على جميع أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين المنتخبين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم منكر فضائلهم غاصب حقوقهم ومراتبهم ومنزلتهم ومقامهم من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في قرآنه الكريم وهو أصدق القائلين قوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Alamdar, you're right, it is cold. I saw you back there. Me surprised, it's possible to turn the AC down just a tad.
Sure, definitely.
Yesterday we were really hot, so I think they're just trying to make up for it now. Today, what I'm talking about is quite specific to some of the older boys. For those of you who are younger though, it still applies. So what I want to talk about today is primarily about the way that we do tabligh, the way that we teach people about Islam. And a lot of what I talk about is going to be based on social media, what we see on, Twitter and TikTok and Insta and things like that, but particularly Twitter, which I know a lot of the younger guys might not use. But the principles of teaching people about Islam, they still apply no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, whether you're in the playground at school, whether you're at the mosque with your mates, no matter where you are, these principles still apply. The principles of A, teaching people about Islam, and B, Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, encouraging people to do good and discouraging them from doing bad. And in fact, Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, and it's important to distinguish the two. So one is tabligh and the other is Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. Tabligh means to teach people about Islam. Amr bil Ma'ruf is to invite people and encourage people to do good. Nahy anil Munkar is discouraging them from doing bad. There's a distinction here and it's an important one. Why? Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahy anil Munkar, they're wajib on everybody, no matter who you are. It's wajib upon you to encourage people to do good and discourage people from doing bad. Tabligh, however, to teach people about Islam, to invite people towards Islam, that's only wajib on scholars, on ulama. It's not wajib on each and every one of us to invite people towards Islam, but it is very, very highly recommended. Of course it is. You're calling people to the religion of Allah Azza wa Jalla. You're teaching people about the religion of Islam. Of course that's going to be highly recommended. But there's certain levels of recommendation. Certain things are highly recommended and they have great reward. Some things are highly recommended and the reward isn't that great in terms of your thawab, in terms of Jannah, but you get reward in this life. There's different levels of mustahabat. Some things are more recommended than others. If you want to understand how important it is, how highly recommended it is to do tabligh, to invite people towards Islam, let's look at a few hadith. The first is a hadith of our Holy Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Who says that the best from amongst my ummah, the best from amongst my ummah is he who invites people towards God. But not just that. He doesn't end it there. He who invites people towards God and makes them such that he loves them. So makes them such that Allah Azza wa Jalla loves them. The best of my ummah is somebody who invites somebody towards God. So if somebody invites, let's say you guys, you've got your friends. If you invite them towards Allah Azza wa Jalla, the Prophet already has said, you are the best amongst his ummah. But then there's a step further. Something more that you have to do. What's that? Make that person somebody who Allah Azza wa Jalla loves. Now the second portion of this hadith. This applies, of course, if you're talking about somebody who is not Muslim becoming Muslim. Make them a Muslim, make them a good Muslim. Cool. At the same time, we're talking about Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. If you have friends who, they may be Muslim by name, they may be Muslim, they may do some things but not others. Yeah. They may pray but they don't fast in Ramzan, or they may fast in Ramzan but they don't pray. They may do the salah but they don't read Quran. There's improvements that can be made. And that's the case for all of us. There's always some kind of improvement that we can make. None of us is perfect. There's always a step above. To make somebody more beloved by Allah Azza wa Jal, which means to make somebody come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even that would bring you into that kind of fold of the best of the Ummah of Rasulullah. But then look at the rights that you're given as well if you bring somebody to Islam. The special status that you're given. Sheikh Saduq, who is one of our greatest scholars in Islamic history. And so that you understand, it's important to recognize our scholars, so that you understand who Sheikh Saduq is. Sheikh Saduq wrote one of the 4 most authentic books of Shia Hadith. So almost every hadith that you hear from the Mimbar, from a Maulana, from anyone, some way, in one way or another, it is derived back to the teachings of 3 people. AlQuaim, another great scholar, Sheikh Tusi, another great scholar, and Sheikh Saduq. And between them, there are 4 books of hadith which are now the kind of the cornerstone, the basis of our hadith as people who believe in Shia Islam. So in one of his books, Al-Amali, he narrates from Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, he narrates a story of the Imam where Imam is talking about Nabi Musa. Prophet Musa is speaking to Allah Azza wa Jal, and he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, what's the reward for somebody who converts somebody else, who brings somebody to Islam? What does Allah Azza wa Jal say the reward is? What does Allah Azza wa Jal tell Nabi Musa the reward is? He says that on the day of Qiyamah, the day of judgment, if somebody has invited somebody else to Islam, that person who invited somebody to Islam on that day will be able to take whoever he wants into heaven. He is granted the power of intercession. Now what's intercession? Shifa, exactly. Shifa means that for somebody who in this life did not live up to the standards required to go to heaven, Allah Azza wa Jal, out of the love He has for somebody else, will forgive the sins of that person and then allow them to bring that person into heaven. Now there's one thing to note here as well. When Islam says that, Masalan, you'll be able to bring anybody you want into heaven, there's a certain caveat with that. Doesn't mean you won't be able to bring anybody you want. But the way heaven works, the way the afterlife works in particular, is Jahannam is known as detachment from Allah Azza wa Jal. You're taken away from Allah Azza wa Jal. Jannah is the opposite. It's a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you reach Jannah, you'll still have desires, you'll still have things that you want to do. And the beauty of Jannah is that you will get those things. What you want in Jannah, you get that. You want grapes, you get grapes. You want flowing rivers, you get flowing rivers. These are the descriptions of Jannah that we have already. But whatever it is, if you want it, in Jannah you can get it. But here's the thing, when you're in Jannah, because of that connection with Allah Azza wa Jal, that higher level of connection that you get, you're not going to want things that are un-Islamic anymore. When you're there, you're not going to want to have a fight with somebody. That won't be one of your desires. That kind of anger, it won't be within you anymore. Why? Because of that high level of connection you have with Allah Azza wa Jal. So yeah, all your desires in Jannah will come true. Whatever you want in Jannah, you'll get that. But at the same time, you won't want anything un-Islamic. You won't desire anything that is against Islam, that is against what Allah Azza wa Jalla says. So, here when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, somebody who brings another person to the religion of Islam, or not the religion of Islam, but the religion of Allah at the time of Nabi Musa. Somebody who brings another person to the religion of Allah Azza wa Jalla, he's allowed to bring whoever he wants into heaven. Now you tell me, at that moment where you've got that higher connection with Allah Azza wa Jalla, that raised connection, that raised level, are you going to want to bring people into heaven if they weren't good Muslims themselves? Are you going to want to bring people into heaven who rejected the faith, who didn't do what Allah Azza wa Jalla told them to? No. See, and even in this life this applies. The love that we have for people around us, it has to go through Allah Azza wa Jalla. It has to go through our religion. And that might seem like a far-fetched idea. Or it might even seem like, you know what, that's an ideal, but we don't do that. But we do it more than we realize. We do it a lot more than we think. Why? If a friend of yours started insulting Islam, would you be as friendly with them? No, because you love Islam more. As soon as their actions go against it, all of a sudden, the relationship with that friend starts to falter. And as you guys get older, get to like university age, you'll realize a lot of your mates start doing things that you never thought they would do. A lot of the people around you will start doing things that your whole lives you thought, oh, you'd never do that. People will start drinking. People will start doing drugs. These kind of things, they're normalized as you get older. But if you stay steadfast on Islam, and if you stay with that mindset that I would never do these things, you might still talk to those people, you might still hang out with them and chill with them, but that level of connection, that friendship, that relationship you have, it will grow a bit more distant. It will grow weaker. Why? Because the love you have for people goes through Islam. It goes through Allah Azza wa Jalla. In the same way, let's take the most extreme love we have, the love we have for our parents. If your parents now were to turn around and say, you know what, I'm not Muslim anymore. Today we're going to, I don't know, they come home and they say, today we're having bacon. Not turkey bacon, actual bacon. At this point, what are you going to think? In your mind, there will be a thought that, this is my dad, really? This is my mum, really? Like, this isn't the person I always knew my whole life. This isn't what I was raised to do. This doesn't seem right. And all of a sudden, that relationship has doubts creeping into it. Why? Because that relationship already goes through Allah Azza wa Jalla, whether you realize it or not. We are already better Muslims than we give ourselves credit for. This idea that we love people because of Islam, we already embody that. We already do it. It's not some far-fetched idea. So, when Allah Azza wa Jalla says, coming back to the point, I kind of ran off on a tangent here, but coming back to the point, when Allah Azza wa Jalla says that you'll be able to bring whoever you want into heaven, you're going to bring somebody into heaven who already has the desire for heaven, who already has the worthiness for heaven. It may be a mistake or two that meant they weren't what we call layak of heaven. They weren't admitted into heaven by Allah Azza wa Jalla, but it's not a guarantee that the person you take into heaven wasn't already going there. It's not a guarantee that the person you are taking to heaven is someone destined for the hellfire. Recite Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I like to split my speech up into little portions. And I've gone way over time on this portion. I've spent a bit too much time speaking about this. So the last thing I'll mention when it comes to tabligh, teaching people about Islam, Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, the last thing I'll mention about how important it is, in Islam, everything has a tax. Everything. You earn money, you give sadaqah. And in the same way, there's a tax on knowledge. And the tax on knowledge is what? When you get knowledge, you give knowledge. So when you learn something, you teach that back to the people. This is the tax on knowledge that we have to pay in Islam. It's required, it's necessary. Through your Amr bil Ma'ruf, through your Nahy anil Munkar. If you're a scholar, an alim, through your tabligh, that's wajib. We have to recognize we have a duty. But with that duty, again, there's responsibilities. With that duty, there are rules. With that duty, there are certain ways we carry that out. But if we want to look at how that duty runs, let's look at it through the ages. How was tabligh done throughout time? Today we talk about, doing tabligh on, Twitter and Insta and what have you. But through the ages, how was this tabligh done? How were people taught about Islam? How were people brought towards Islam? The very first invitation to Islam was what? Da'watul Ashra, by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. Da'watul Ashra is the occasion when the Prophet first invited people openly to Islam. So what did he do? The Prophet receives the instruction from Allah Azza wa Jal and he comes to who? His uncle Hazrat Abu Talib. Hazrat Abu Talib alayhi salam, he sets his house, he gets it ready, and we've gone through all of these days of Majalis. If I don't recite some kind of fadail, then it seems like we've missed the trick, we've missed something in these Majalis. These are the remembrance of Ali Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Recite that. So we have to remember those who they loved, and we have to do it with a smile on our face at times. We remember them when we cry, but let's not forget how great they were as well, and smile over that greatness. Allah Azza wa Jal, it's a beautiful point I had. Allah Azza wa Jal is inviting people to his religion. The greatest message ever delivered. The most important thing that the Prophet said at that time. This great important delivery of this important message. Allah Azza wa Jal, that's who this message is coming from, remember. It's not coming from Rasulullah himself. It's coming through Rasulullah from Allah Azza wa Jal. So why then does Allah Azza wa Jal not hold this in his own house? Why then does Allah Azza wa Jal not do Da'watul Ashira where? In the Holy Kaaba. This is the house of Allah. This is the message of Allah that he wants people to hear. This da'wah, this invitation is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why is it not in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? See, at that time in history, the Holy Kaaba was filled with what? Idols. Allah Azza wa Jal knew the place where the message of Tawheed will start, it cannot be a place filled with idols. It cannot be a place filled with idol worshippers. So where did he go? Where did Allah Azza wa Jal send all the people? He sent them to the house of Hazrat Abu Talib alayhi salam. Why? He knows that Hazrat Abu Talib alayhi salam, his house is that house. There were never any idols in that house. There were never any idol worshippers in that house. He goes to Hazrat Abu Talib alayhi salam. Now, a lot of people call Hazrat Abu Talib a kafir. They say he was an idol worshipper. This here is the first proof that he was not. Imam Ali alayhi salam is there. The Prophet is there. Hazrat Abu Talib is there. The family of the Prophet are all there. The close companions are all there. Everyone sits and they eat. They sit and they eat, and what happens? Once they've eaten, Prophet Muhammad stands up to tell people, I've come forth to tell you about a religion. I've come forth to tell you to stop worshipping these idols and worship just one God. But he doesn't get the chance to say that. Why? A man by the name of Abu Lahab. A man by the name of Abu Lahab who is cursed in the Quran. He stands up and he starts talking over the Prophet, making sure that nobody hears the Prophet. He knew what he was doing. So he gathers the people and he tells them, we've eaten now, let's go. Before the Prophet can say anything. So the Prophet comes to Hazrat Abu Talib again and he says, my uncle, they didn't let me talk. I didn't get to say the message I wanted to say. Hazrat Abu Talib invites everyone again. Second night. Same thing happens. Third night, when everyone's eaten, the Prophet Muhammad stands up to talk. Same time Abu Lahab stands up to shut him down. As Abu Lahab stands up, Hazrat Abu Talib also stands up. Now Hazrat Abu Talib is known for his height, he's known for how strong he was, he's known for how brave he was. As Hazrat Abu Talib stands up, now everyone falls silent. Now no one's saying anything. Abu Lahab looks up at Hazrat Abu Talib. Hazrat Abu Talib looks down towards Rasulullah. He waits for Rasulullah to say his message. At this point, what does Rasulullah deliver? The message of Tawheed. This was the first instance of da'wah. This was the first instance of calling people to Islam. And as we're at this point, I might as well mention what the Prophet said in that moment as well. He asked, who will stand beside me? Who will accept this religion with me? So who stands up other than Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam? Recite that to Allah, Muhammad wa ala. So what does the Prophet say then? He says, Ya Ali, you are my brother, and my follower, and my successor after me. These are the words of the Prophet in Da'watul Ashira. So the moment he announces Tawheed, at the same time he announces the Wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Reciting Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. This was the first invitation to Islam, the first sighting we have of Tabligh in the time of Islam. Then we go on to the lifetime of the Prophet once he has told people about Islam. The lifetime of the Prophet, what did he used to do? He used to send ambassadors out. Ambassadors out to different lands across the world to tell people about this religion, to tell people about Tawheed, to tell people about Islam. Amongst those was the brother of Imam Ali alayhi salam, Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar, who the Prophet sent where? I'm expecting some of you to know this at least, because I said it in a Majlis the other day which you were at. He sends Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar to Abyssinia, which is now Ethiopia in Africa. Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar goes to Abyssinia and he was very close to the Prophet. The Prophet loved Imam Ali alayhi salam, so of course he loved his brother and Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar as well. Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar goes to Abyssinia. There he delivers the message of Islam. Now a point to note here, and I'm going to move on quite swiftly again. A point to note here. There was no Islam in Africa before Hazrat Jafar Tayyar arrived there, before he delivered the message of Islam. And he delivered the message of Islam in such a way that the first person he delivered the message to was a Christian priest. That Christian priest, further on in his life, goes on to recite the nikah of Rasulullah. This is the way that the tabligh was done, that people, you remember the hadith we spoke about at the start? The hadith of Rasulullah, which says, the best of my ummah is those amongst you who brings people to Islam and makes them people who Allah Azza wa Jal loves. So bring people to Islam and make them good Muslims. How much better of a Muslim do you have to make someone for them to become the person that recites one of the nikahs of Rasulullah? He's in good company. Abu Talib recited one of the other nikahs of Rasulullah. This Christian priest who became a Muslim and became such a good Muslim that now Rasulullah is trusting him with such a great responsibility. But the point I want to mention here, the point I want us to realize, Hazrat Jafar Tayyar, we don't often hear about him. But we should learn about all these holy personalities. Why? Because to this day, every single person in Africa, in that great continent, who decides to become a Muslim, who recites the kalima of Allah Azza wa Jalla, Islam, every single person who says, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger, and Ali ibn Abi Talib is his successor, every single person who bears witness, that is Sadqa Jariyah for who? Hazrat Jafar Tayyar. That is Sadqa Jariyah, that's reward for that, goes to who? Hazrat Jafar Tayyar, the very first person to take Islam to Africa. This is another way that tabligh was done. Letters were sent out, people were sent out as ambassadors. And then when times became more difficult, the imams would secretly teach people about Islam. They would secretly teach people in their homes, the people they trusted, the people who were close to them. There are times we see in du'as, the imams used to use their du'as, their supplications, to teach people about Islam. This was when times were different. When the rulers and the tyrants of the time wouldn't allow Islam to be spread, when people would burn the books of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim Islam, they would burn the books of Islam to try and stop the spread of Islam. So Islam had to be taught very quietly. And then you have Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam's time. The Imam, when it comes time for him to do tabligh, he lives in a time where it's easy to do tabligh. He lived in a time between the fall of the Umayyad dynasty, the Umayyad Empire, and the rise of the Abbasi Empire. I wanted to go into detail and explain this, but looking at the time, I'll leave that for you guys to look into. Search up the time of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far Sadiq, and you'll see why he was able to do tabligh in such a great way, in such a vast way. And for those of you who want to go to university, go to university. It's good, mashallah. I'm not saying it's the only way, but if you want to go to university, definitely do it. Why? This concept of universities was started by none other than our sixth Imam. He used to call them, at the time, they were called centers for learning. He would have up to 4,000 students at any one time coming to learn from him. And not just about Islam, but all manner of different topics about the world. Again, Islam, when it tells you to learn, it tells you it's wajib to learn, right? It doesn't say it's wajib to learn about Islam. It says it's wajib to learn about the world. If you learn about the world well enough, with an open mind and an open heart, you'll reach the conclusion that there can only be a God. Once you reach the conclusion that there can only be a God, you reach the conclusion that there can only be one. When you reach the conclusion there can only be one God, you go further and further down the line of logic and you reach Allah Azza wa Jalla and none other than Him. Recite out to Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So in the time of Imam Ja'far Sadiq, tabligh was done through universities. People were invited to centers for learning and they were taught about Islam amongst other things. And now I'm going to zoom straight through history and come right past that all to the time of Ghaiba, the occultation, where our Imam is in hiding. And from then till now, the manner of tabligh has been quite the same. It's been done how? Through the mimbar, through Majalis, through the sermons on a Friday, the khutbah you hear on a Friday, through lectures, through minars, things like this, gatherings, and from the mimbar. And at this point, I have to say something, and it may sound like something quite contrary to what a lot of you have heard before, but it's really important we realize this. The entirety of our Islam does not come from this mimbar. And stay with me when I say that. The mimbar is very important. It's a very important part of our religion, but the entirety of your religion doesn't come from here. This is just the start. Everything you do after the majlis, that's the entirety of your religion. That's where the religion actually comes from. Take this as a little snippet, go and learn about what you heard here. This is just a small portion to push you. This is like the springboard that you use to jump up and elevate your levels. The mimbar isn't where it ends, the mimbar is where it starts. And this mimbar is now the main platform for tabligh. Until we get to this digital age that we're talking about. And now, When you look online, there's all sorts of different types of tabligh going on. Some good, some bad. This is taking far too long. Some good, some bad. But there's ways to identify. There's ways to look at it. First thing we have to recognize, and this applies to us as well, is the manner in which we do tabligh. The manner in which we teach people about Islam. The manner in which we do amr al-ma'ruf and nahi al-munkar. First, I'll start with the hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha. He says what? He says, Bismillah, he says, if a speech comes from the heart, it shall enter the heart. If you want people to believe what you're saying, believe it yourself. Do you know how many times I have parents coming up to me and saying, my kid doesn't read namaz, I don't know how to get him to read namaz. Well, do you read your namaz? Do you read it with your heart? Do you believe in it? Do you believe what you're reading? If you don't believe what you're doing, how are you going to convince somebody else to do that? If you don't believe in what it is that you're trying to teach somebody, how are you going to teach them with true belief? Islam is logical, it is rational, yes. But the great thing about Islam is it doesn't discount your heart. It doesn't say that only the mind matters and not the heart. No. Some religions say only the mind matters, not the heart. That's incorrect. Some religions say only the heart matters, not the mind. That's incorrect. Islam takes both into account. It places greater weight on your mind, on your logic, on your rationale, how you think. But it also says, look, you're human beings. You'll have feelings, your heart. It has its own voice as well. You have to listen to that. You have to tune into that. So what you say must come from the heart. You must believe it yourself. Imam Ali says here, natural. The second point I'll mention is the Risala of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Recite Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You guys sound really tired today. The Risala of our Holy Prophet came after 40 years of his life. Why? The Prophet spent 40 years making sure everybody knew he is a sadiq, the truthful, al-amin, the trustworthy. When people would throw litter at him in the roads, you all know the story of the Prophet and the old lady. There was an old lady who used to throw rubbish on the Prophet every day as he walked past their house to go to the masjid. One day, nobody threw litter on the Prophet. Carried on walking. Second day, nobody threw litter on the Prophet. This is after years of having rubbish thrown at him. So at some point he asked, what happened to that lady who always used to throw rubbish at him? Someone tells him that lady is sick. So the Prophet goes to visit her. As the Prophet enters her room where she's lying there on the bed sick, she thinks, oh no, he's come to get his revenge, he's come to attack me, he's come to hurt me, whatever it is. What does the Prophet do? He sits beside her, he asks her how she is, he takes care of her, and it's the akhlaq of the Prophet that brought that lady to Islam. The Prophet had a shining face, he had nur on his face. It wasn't the nur of the Prophet that brought her to Islam. It wasn't the fact that he had 10 followers with him every day when he walked past her house. She didn't care about how many followers he had. She didn't care about the nur on his face. She didn't care about any of that. It was the akhlaq of the Prophet that brought her to Islam. The manners of the Prophet. So when you're talking about Islam and you find yourself swearing, or you find yourself insulting somebody, or you find yourself taking the mick out of somebody, just think about which Islam you're teaching them. Think about what it is you're teaching. There's a beautiful saying. It's in a hadith or anything, it's just a saying. That you catch more flies with honey than you do with salt. What does that mean? The sweeter you are with somebody, the nicer you are to somebody, the more likely it is that they're going to listen to what you have to say. The kinder you are to somebody, the more likely it is that they're going to open up their hearts and their minds to listen to you. But if you go at somebody with bad akhlaq, if you go at somebody swearing and shouting, if you go at somebody insulting them, why would they want to listen to you? Why would they think of you as somebody to listen to? And it's important to recognize that. Because if we're not delivering the message of Islam in an Islamic way, then we have to question, why am I even delivering that message? What's the reasoning behind it? Is it genuinely to bring people towards Islam? Or is it some other personal reasons? Is it my own ego? Is it because I think I'm better than people, my own arrogance? Or what is it? Why am I bringing people towards Islam? We have to look at why we do these things. The reason for trying to bring people towards Islam. I'm going to zoom over this bit again. We're told, and this is it's a hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam, but I do have to mention here, it's not a very highly substantiated hadith. There's not a great many sources to say where it comes from. There's a lot of doubt that this may just be one of those Tumblr hadiths, one of those Twitter hadiths that somebody just posted and everyone went, yeah, that sounds about right. Where it's attributed to the Imam that he said, a fool's mind is at the mercy of his tongue and a wise man's tongue is under the control of his mind. Before you start swearing and shouting and insulting people, just remember, Imam Ali is telling you, a fool's mind is at the mercy of his tongue. What does that mean? A fool will speak before he thinks. Whereas a wise man, somebody intellectual, somebody clever, he will think before he speaks. Alhamdulillah, I've had the honor of sitting with many great scholars. Alhamdulillah, I've had that sharaf. I've been able and been blessed to be able to do that. And I'll tell you this for a fact. The greatest scholars that I've sat, the ones who have the most knowledge, are always the ones, not only do they speak the least, but every word they say, it has meaning to them. They're efficient with their words. They won't sit there and waffle. They won't sit there and talk about anything and everything. No. They'll only open their mouths when they have something truly valuable to say, and you recognize that and you see that when you hear them speak. It's very important to do that. But now, there's a very important responsibility as well. With everything we say, with everything we do, our responsibility is massively grown, and this is where we come onto the social media side of things. And I mentioned this before, I think it was the first night or the second night. I'm coming back to it, and I really want to stress this point to you guys. When you're engaging in debates and topics and things like that online, let's say online, primarily I'm talking about Twitter, but this applies everywhere. So in your WhatsApp groups with your mates, on your Insta, when you post something on Snap, you shared a story about Imam Hussein Islam and Muharram, for instance. When you do all of these things, particularly if your accounts are public, a lot more people are seeing them now than people used to beforehand. And the example I gave on the first day, I'll give the same example, because it's a very grave example. If you really think about it, it's a very scary example. Scary for me, especially. And this is a point of fiqh, a point of rule, Islamic rule. If I sit here for 45 minutes and deliver this lecture, on the Day of Judgment, Allah will ask me about everything I did in my life. He won't ask me about 45 minutes for this lecture, no. If there's 70 of you in this room, I have to answer for 45 minutes of 70 people's time. I'll be asked about that 45 minutes 70 times over. And that's for everybody sat in this room. Then you've got the people watching online on YouTube. Then you've got everybody you go home and speak to about the lecture. Allah Azza wa Jalla is going to ask me about each and every one of those things. Each and every one of you sitting in this room, Allah is going to ask me, what did I do with your time when you came to listen to me? That's very scary for me. For me, that's the only thing that makes me really nervous about reciting Majalis. Alhamdulillah, speaking in front of a crowd, that's not a problem. Sitting up here, that doesn't scare me. It's the fact that I'm responsible for so much time and so many people's reaction to what I say. Because say if I say something wrong, if I sit here and tell you, for instance, that there are two gods, and somebody here believes that, just one person believes that, and they go home and they live their life thinking there's two gods. So one day they grow up, they have kids, they teach their kids there's two gods. Those kids teach their kids and whatnot, and that goes on, and they live their life according to that principle that there's two gods now. For that person who I taught, and for everybody they taught after that, that there's two gods, that's on me. Because I'm the one who said it first. I'm the one who taught them. Now understand, I can pretty much see everybody who's in this room right now. Some of you are a little shorter than others, so you're a bit hidden, but I can see most of you. There's sisters behind the curtain, I can't see how many people are there. People behind the camera, I don't know how many people watch it on there. But at least I know roughly who I'm speaking to, the kind of people I'm speaking to, what your mindset is in general, how you're thinking, how you're feeling. When you go online and you say something, there's no telling how many people that reaches. That could go to hundreds of people, that could go to thousands of people, that could go to millions of people. And you're responsible for each and every one of those interactions. You're responsible for the reach that you get on your tweet. You're responsible for every view on that Insta story. So if you're posting something that's detrimental to Islam, you're going to be asked about that. Of course, the flip side is there. If you say something good and it's in line with Islam, it's in accordance with Islam and what Allah Azza wa Jalla wants, and people take that, you get the reward for all of those people as well. But at the same time, if you make a mistake, it's on you. Allah Azza wa Jalla is going to ask you. And now we live in a time where you can't simply say on the Day of Judgment, oh Allah, I made a mistake, oh Allah, it was an accident. Why? Because the knowledge is all there. We can all get that knowledge. It's available to all of us. Of course, there's different levels of these things. There's different statures of knowledge. And our scholars, of course, are the people we turn to for knowledge. A simple Google search is not enough. Why? Because that will tell you the bare fact. It won't tell you everything that goes behind it. I saw today, in fact, I saw a nice little clip about how facts can be deceiving. And there's the fact that 65% of Americans are overweight for their height. That's a statistic. 65% of Americans are overweight for their height. And a man came and he said, no, but these statistics, they're misleading. Why? Because you could turn around and go, no, the problem isn't that they're overweight. The problem is just that they're too short for their weight. It's not that they're overweight for their height, it's that they're under-heighted for their weight. All of a sudden, you flip, the same statistic is changed, and now you look at it from a different angle, and you've reached a completely different conclusion. They're not overweight, they're short. That's the difference. Same statistic, same thing, but you look at it in a different way. Now, anybody with half a mind will tell you that's not how it works, really. But then, when you look at the complexities of what we're talking about in Islam, it takes more than half a mind to figure it out. It takes scholars years and years and years of studying to figure it out. And here you have people who do one quick Google search and decide to start issuing fatwas online. And the last thing I'm going to mention is debating with people online. There's certain things we have to look at. Why am I debating? What manner am I debating in? We've spoken about this already. The why I'm going to quickly mention again. Make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Make sure if you're speaking to somebody about the religion, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And one thing I'll say to all of you, your parents might not like me saying this, but I'm going to say this 100%. When you get into an argument with somebody online, or when you're debating somebody online or offline, whatever it is, if you don't have the idea in your mind that I might be wrong, then you're not actually looking for the truth. You're not in that debate with the right purpose. And I'm sitting here on the minbar and I'm telling you, if you don't look at other religions thinking there's a possibility it might be right, if you don't look at other ideas thinking there's a possibility that that's right and Islam is wrong, then you're not actually searching for the truth. I'll tell you this for a fact. I looked at these other religions with the view that, you know what, Islam might be wrong and they might be right. And when I looked at it that way, I realized, no, Islam is more right than anything else out there. But if I looked at them and thought, no, all I want to do is I want to prove Islam is right, then I'd be looking at them for all the wrong reasons. There's no point in me looking at them, because my mind's made up, it's not going to change. So make sure, if you're engaging in some kind of debate, if you're engaging in some kind of argument, do it to learn. Don't do it to reject immediately. And I know what I'm saying here. I know how heavy it is. But do it to actually learn. And the reason I'm saying that here is because when you do it to learn, then you'll be able to recognize when the person you're talking to isn't doing it to learn. You'll be able to recognize when the person you're talking to is only doing it because they want to prove they're right. And if all they want to do is prove they're right, then there's no point you teaching them about Islam. There's no point you talking to them about Islam. Because they're not going to accept it. They don't care what you have to say. They just want to prove that they're right. You have to accept the possibility that you might be wrong in order to find the truth. And when you do that, you also realize who is looking for the truth and who's just looking to boost their ego, or who's looking to shove their opinion on you. It's very important. And the last thing, the very, very final thing, I promise. We have to look at where we have these arguments and these debates and where we talk about these things. Islam tells us question. Question your religion, question your beliefs until you've got no more questions left. That's fair, that's true. Islam tells us that. But look at where you're questioning it. Because see, different people have different levels of understanding. Different people have different levels of intellect. Different people have different levels of knowledge. What does that mean? If I were to sit here, there's loads of really young guys here, yeah? If I were to sit here in front of you guys and start discussing with you the philosophical questions that we were asked in Iran and that we were trying to figure out when we were in the Hausa, the majority of you would turn around at the end of the day and go, oh my God, there's no God. Oh my God, Allah doesn't exist. Why all those questions that he was asking? Yeah, that will make sense. What is he talking like? Oh my God. That's why I don't discuss that level of philosophical questions with a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old. At the same time, people in Islam, they will struggle with the things you have to say. People outside of Islam will struggle even more. The fact of the matter is, the things I can discuss with somebody who's, for instance, people who are my classmates in Iran, we study the same kind of things, we know the same kind of topics, so we can explore the same kind of questions, the same kind of doubts. You can't do that with everybody. Everybody has their own level of understanding, you have to do things according to that. So, if you have a question about Islam, ask that question and find that answer for yourself. Don't ask that question in front of the entire world, where people who won't get the answer, all they'll do is, yeah, that guy's question is right, that doesn't make sense. Islam must not exist. You're asking that question for the right reasons. You want to find the truth. All they've heard is the question you had without looking for any kind of answer. The answers are out there, but if you don't look for them, if you don't find them, you will come to the conclusion that, yeah, all these questions, they're right. Something doesn't seem like it, something doesn't add up here. We have to be careful where we ask these questions, where we engage in these debates and in these conversations. If you ask in front of the wrong people, then they will have the wrong takeaway from it. What they understand from your question could lead them away from Islam. It could lead them away from the religion. Why? Especially online. This is more true than anything online. Let's say me and Alamdar are having a conversation, yeah? And we're having a conversation about something that's completely relevant. I don't know, let's say, all right, I'll give you an example. I'm a big Arsenal fan. In case you guys haven't realized, I'm a massive Arsenal fan. When I'm talking about Arsenal not doing well, I don't do that in front of a Tottenham fan. I don't do that in front of a Chelsea fan. I only do that in front of other Arsenal fans. Why? Because if I start saying the things that make Arsenal not so great in front of people who already don't like Arsenal, then they're going to hate Arsenal even more. They're going to hate on Arsenal even more. They're going to take the mick out of us even more. So I only keep that kind of stuff with Arsenal fans. I don't talk about, and I maintain that nobody who's not an Arsenal fan is allowed to say anything bad about Arsenal. But here's the thing. If I want to take the mick out of Tottenham, I'll do that in front of everybody. I'll do that no matter who's there. I'm looking at my audience, right? I don't want people to start thinking bad of Arsenal, so I'm not going to say anything bad about Arsenal. Even if there are things that don't make sense, I know how great Arsenal is. Other people don't get it. At the same time, if I want to start speaking about the issues with Arsenal, it's logical, it's rational. I was going to give an example, then I thought, no, because that's just doing exactly what I said I don't want to do. If I start speaking about the issues with Arsenal in front of everybody, then everybody gets to take the mick out of Arsenal. Because not everybody gets the things that I love about my club. Not everybody gets what that is. We have to be careful about where we speak about certain things, who we speak about them in front of. You have questions about Islam? Fine. Speak to other Muslims about it. Other Muslims who are on the same level of faith and understanding as you. You have questions about Shia Islam? Fine. It's good to have these questions. Speak to other people who are Shia about it. Don't speak about it in front of all the Muslims in the world. Speak about it in front of other Shias. Other Shias who are on the same level as you. You have a question about something very, very specific in your religion, ask somebody who knows about it, but don't ask in front of people who don't care about the answer. Don't ask in front of people who just need an excuse to fall away from the religion. But Islam does remind us again and again, you are free to ask. You do have the freedom to ask those questions, and you're encouraged to, you're meant to. And it's just one of the many freedoms Islam gives us. One of the many, many freedoms we have. See, tonight, we remember the man who embodied freedom. We remember the man who truly lived up to the name of Hur. The name Hur means free. And there was nobody more free than Hazrat Hur. Nobody who was able to be as free as Hazrat Hur was. Why? Because Hazrat Hur alayhi salatu wasalam, he understood what it meant to not be free, and he fought for his freedom. When I say he fought for his freedom, what do I mean? Listen to the story of Hazrat Hur. Listen to what happens in the life of Hazrat Hur, the final parts of Hazrat Hur's life. As Imam Hussain alayhi salam and his family are traveling through the deserts, they reach a small river, a small stream. Imam Hussain alayhi salam calls Abu Fadl Abbas. He says, Abbas, gather some water. Hazrat Abbas says, Mawla, we have enough water. We're going to carry on ahead. There's more streams coming up ahead. For now, we have enough water. And Abdullah says, no, Abbas, get some more water. And Abdullah, when he says something, Abbas, he accepts, he does it. What the Imam says, Hazrat Abbas listens to. So he says, yeah, Imam, tell me, how much water should I get then? We have enough, so then tell me how much do we need? How much more should I get? Imam Hussain says, however much we have, however much you think is enough to get to the next place where there is a river, take 4 times that amount of water. 4 times that amount of water and take it with us. Abu Fadl Abbas, he starts filling the mashks, the water capsules. Starts filling them, he gets 4 times as much water as he thinks he needs. And then Imam Hussain calls one of his other companions, he said, look in the distance, can you see something? He said, I can see some trees waving in the distance. He says, no, those aren't trees. As they come closer, they realize they weren't trees. In fact, these were alams. We have the alam of Abu Fadl Abbas, the flag of Abu Fadl Abbas. Every army has its own flag. This was the flag of the army of Hur. As that flag approaches, Imam Hussein alayhi salam tells Abu Fadl Abbas, set the tent here. We'll wait here. They stop. The army of Hur arrives. They speak with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Hur tells the Imam, look, I've come to capture you, I've come to take you to where I say you'll go. The Imam says no. As they are talking, what does the Imam see? He sees Hur's horses hopping from side to side. They won't stand still. Imam Hussein says to Hur, what's the matter with your horses? What's the matter with your men? Why does nobody stand still? Hur turns around and he says, the sand here is so hot that the horses' hooves, which are made of metal, can't stay on the sand. It's burning the horses. Allah turns to Abu Fadl Abbas and says, Abbas, give them the water. Give them the water so that they can do what? So that they can feed their children? No. So that they can feed the women that are with them? No. There are no women with them. There are no children with them. Who's about Allah give this water to? Abbas, go and give this water to them so that they can wash the feet of their horses. As Abbas goes, he hands the water over. And the soldiers of Hur start drinking the water. They throw the water on the feet of their horses to cool them down. At this point, what does Imam Hussein alayhi salam see? This is a narration from one of the soldiers of the army of Hur. He says, I was so hot and I was so dehydrated. I needed water so badly that I was shaking, I was shivering. And as I was shivering, I fell from my horse onto the ground. As I gained my composure, as I came back to composure, I asked somebody for a bit of water. They brought me some water in a bowl. And as they brought it forward to me and they reached out with this bowl of water, because I was so thirsty, I jumped at it. As I jumped at it, I dropped the water. The water, it all leaked out onto the sand. So they gave me some more, but because I was shivering so much, I couldn't drink the water. I couldn't take it into my mouth. So at this point, I saw there was a man sitting where all the tents were. The man, he stands up from his chair. He goes, grabs a bowl of water, brings it, and with his own 2 hands, he starts giving me that water. He says, once I had drank, I turned to one of the other soldiers and I said to them, who was that man? The man who just walked over and gave me water with his own 2 hands, who was that? The soldier says, do you not know? That man was Hussein ibn Ali. That man was Abu Abdullah, the man we have come to capture. See, why would Imam Hussein not give this man water? Why would he not quench this man's thirst? Imam Hussein alayhi salam learned from his father Ali ibn Abi Talib. There's a line of Masai of Imam Ali alayhi salam's funeral, of Imam Ali alayhi salam's death, which far too often we gloss over. Far too often we don't realize how painful this really was. Abu Fadl Abbas, when he heard the cry from Masjid al-Kufa, what did he do? He grabs his sword and he rushes to Masjid al-Kufa. He sees a man has attacked his father. What does he do? He draws his sword to attack Ibn Muljim. What does Imam Ali do? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Abbas, no. Look how frightened Ibn Muljim is. Go get him something sweet to drink. The thing that we never ever really focus on. Look, see, Imam Hussein did the same thing. He gave his enemies water. Imam Ali alayhi salam here, he says, get Ibn Muljim something sweet to drink. The thing we never really focus on is what? There was nothing sweet to drink there in Masjid al-Kufa. Abu Fadl Abbas had to go back to the house of Zainab. He had to ask his sister Zainab, Zainab, I need some milk, I need something sweet to drink. Bibi Zainab gets the milk and she must have asked Abbas, tell me, there was a cry from Masjid al-Kufa, all my brothers ran out of the house, now you're coming back asking for milk. Tell me what has happened, who is the milk for? How will Abu Fadl Abbas tell Sayyida Zainab, Zainab, this milk is not for our father who is wounded. It's not for the people looking after him. This milk that I have just asked you for, this is for Ibn Muljim, the man who attacked our father. Abu Fadl Abbas takes the milk back to Ibn Muljim. This is who Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam are. This is their generosity, this is their care. Even to their killers, they will give them water, they will give them milk. Now, Imam Hussein alayhi salam has given the water to this man, to this soldier. He mounts Ul Jinnah, he tells Abu Fadl Abbas, Abbas, go. Get all the people ready, we are leaving. As Imam Hussein alayhi salam gets ready to leave, he starts riding. Hurbiyan comes alongside him, he starts to ride with the Imam. He says, Hussein ibn Ali, you cannot leave. Imam Hussein looks at Hur, he says, Hur, I will go where I want to. If you want to escort me, you can escort me, you can travel alongside me, but I will go where I want to go. At this point, what does Hazrat Hur do?